I mean, four-wheel drive, it works out nicely. We're
Yeah.
about to go live on setting us up on YouTube.
Oh,
That's why I've
sure,
been
sure.
quiet, just trying to
You do your thing.
just got to get us all set up. Okay, and that we are. Okay. So, for anyone who joins us after the fact and those who are here, welcome, welcome. It is wonderful to be able to learn with everyone, and we do a lot of learning here, but there is no limit to the benefit we draw from it. So I'm glad to have you all with us. We are going to be, as part of our Hartman class here, the point is to learn about Israel and Zionism um, in the perspective that we would at the Hartman Institute. It's not it is based on learning I've done there. But unlike a previous series I did on the Hartman Institute, we're not replaying the greatest hits of their lessons, but rather using the lesson of their tradition to to enhance our own understanding of Israel and Zionism. So just like Hartman, like the summer Beit Midrash, I'm dressed casually. I've got my short sleeves on. Um, we'll focus on a few texts in each class based on the theme, and that we'll study together and then discuss. At Hartman, we would study in Chavruta and then hear from, and then have a group discussion. But here we'll study it together and then discuss together. And we'll strive to understand pluralist discourse and respectful disagreement over the next few weeks together. Now, I'm not sure that all of us here, or even those who will watch after the fact, will have strong disagreement. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. This first class, I doubt we'll have very much, as we're going to talk about Torah, covenant, and the moral imagination of a Jewish state. In subsequent classes, which I'll go over at the end, but just as a pitch for anyone listening, the second class will end up being the tribes of Israeli society, or the tribes of modern Israel. And then the last class will be, which will be after Hanukkah, will be Hopeful Zionism, Jewish Models of Peaceful Settlement. But today we start with Torah, covenant, and the moral imagination of a Jewish state. And we're going to begin where Hartman begins. I'm going to share my screen, mostly so that we can all have some texts on the board. Okay, that should be good. Um, but first, actually, before we even share texts, I want to ask you all, when you hear Torah and Israel, what's the first thing you think of? Or what emotion rises first? Or what uh, fear? Or what hope? What rises from Torah and Israel?
An ethical state based on the Torah.
Okay, so that the Torah teaches ethics, and Torah and Israel, you want to see an ethical state. Wonderful, love it. Anyone else?
I agree with that, but my first reaction was when I hear Torah and Israel, I think of biblical times, of Torah stories, um, and I also think that's me. That's what I am.
Very good. Absolutely. I think that reflects something very true. First of all, yes, you think Torah and Israel. Obviously, biblical Israel comes to mind, which is important to to think of. And also, there's that we have that personal connection. Yes, absolutely. Anyone else have a reflection they would like to share? Okay, well, what we're looking for here's an understanding. What we want to start with is that from our perspective, from the Jewish perspective, from the Hartman perspective, uh, we're going to begin with the Jewish story, the basis. Uh, the understanding that Zionism, as it is not a 19th century political movement, or not just a 19th century political movement, certainly not a 19th century invention. It's a 3,000 year conversation about peoplehood, covenant, land, and responsibility. And so we're gonna talk a little bit now about Torah. So we're gonna study our first text this evening is going to be okay. So Genesis 12, which we could do in Hebrew, but we'll do in English. God said to Avram, "Go forth from your land, your birthplace, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse. And through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Um, And we're also going to have here, so let's start with this text, and then we'll bring it into conversation with some others. When you read this, the Peshat, the simple surface level, I think is pretty understandable to everybody just at first glance. But this is a very deep text. What does it mean to be blessed? What does it mean to bless oneself through someone else? And that what does it mean that God will curse uh, the one, those who curse you? And what does it mean that all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you? Any thought? I want to open it up to thoughts on this before I impose a definition.
Special relationship with Adonai.
Okay, sure. So it could denote some kind of special relationship with God. So God's here saying, "Go forth, and I will make of you a great nation," right? But there are other great nations, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't denote there that would be the only great nation. And right, nowhere here. The interesting thing about what you said, and I want to bounce off of that, is that nowhere here do I don't note particularism or exclusivity anywhere here.
Mm.
Um, not I'm not talking about land right now. I'm not making a veiled reference to absolutely anything. Only that here in the scope of blessings and nations, um, everything seems like it could be its own promise to every nation, to any nation,
Mhm.
until the very last one. Um, when it says, "Through you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed," that becomes a question of what does that mean? Now, we think it means that literally, I think it was Chizkuni, one of the Miforshim, the Torah commentators, says that "through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed" means that people will still name their children Avram or Abraham because of Abraham's goodness. Remember that, of course, God is saying this to Abraham. He's not saying this he didn't gather all the Jews or something and say, "We're saying this to you as a people," right? He's saying this to Abraham, who, as we know, is the father of more than one nation. So yes, so a lack of exclusivity is something I'm bouncing off of and noticing. Does anyone notice anything else?
When it says, "Go forth from your land, your birthplace, and your father's house," I also understand that to mean not just the Peshat meaning, but Leave behind you everything you've been taught, all the old traditions. Have the courage to go forth, and I will show you how to live and what's real.
And take that a step further. So what does that mean when we're talking about, if we were talking about the moral imagination of a Jewish state, because that's a moral idea you put forward in a way, right? Being able to move beyond old limitations can be transcendent. Literally,
Yes.
you are transcending something. So if we're doing that, what does that mean when we're having moral imagination vis-a-vis a Jewish state? How do we apply that Torah? It's an interesting question. You don't have to have an answer for it in this moment. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one before we introduce our next text? We're going to be studying 3 this evening. Okay. Our second text, and I'm going to try and, oh, nope, it won't let me zoom out, but I don't need to. It's big enough. Okay. Our next text is from Exodus. Now, in subsequent weeks, our text won't be from Torah. A lot of our texts are going to be from either rabbinic texts, Talmud, Midrash, or from modern Israeli poets and thinkers and sociologists when applicable. So this week we're getting our real basic Torah texts in. We're getting our foundation. Um, One thing I brought when we're talking about moral imagination, um, and this is Torah obviously, and covenant too, is this phrase from Exodus 19. Uh, Ve'atem tehiu li mamlechet kohanim the goy kadosh. That you should be to me a kingdom of priests or a nation of priests. It could be mamlechet means kingdom, but it also means like mamlachtiut is like stateliness or statesmanship in modern Hebrew. So when you're a mamlechet kohanim, it could be a nation, a kingdom of priests, but it could also be a nation of priests, which might a nation of priests and a holy nation, a goy kadosh, right? A goy is a nation. Goy kadosh is one type of nation, a holy one. What does this mean, and how should this inform our understanding of our responsibilities? Yeah, go ahead. I can't see everyone's hands, so just speak, and I promise there aren't so many of us that it'll be a problem.
Firstly, I'm struck by the fact that this is hundreds of years before Moses and Aaron. So there was no high priest in Israel at that time. He must be referring to a commonly understood notion of holy people, people who tried to
Well,
serve God. And um, I think that's what he's asking us to be, a people
Well,
who
no.
do.
So Moses, we're out of just to reframe us. We're out of Abraham here, and we're this is Exodus now. Moses is here. Like this is
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Moses is we've just done Exodus. We've just left Egypt. Moses and Aaron are mamash with us.
Okay.
At this point. No, I see what I did. I see what we did there, but no, it's okay. But no, so Moses and Aaron are with us at this point. But what does it say about you can take it historically if you want, especially Lauren, and say, this is post Exodus, but pre any version of Jewish statehood, right? Whatever you want to call it, Jewish kingdom, whatever. The first version of it hasn't existed yet at this point in
Mm-hmm.
Exodus. And so the charge is to be a mamlechet kohanim and a goy kadosh. And so how does that manifest in the world? Such a thing had never existed. Of course, probably hasn't. So, what does it mean that what the expectation is that this new nation, that when you put this in context of Exodus, this is a people who has been forged through human experience over many generations, from Abraham through Egyptian slavery. When you forge things, it gets hot. Funny but true. And then brought out of that, dunked in its water, if we're fulfilling the metaphor, and fully forged as a new kind of people, a new kind of nation, something, a tool, again being forged, a tool through which God can reveal God's truth to the world, so that all people will live by the light of God's teaching. Right? Because if you read the text from the beginning of Genesis up until, well, throughout the whole thing, really, but certainly up through this point in Exodus, what we've seen is God try to create a perfect situation for humanity, a situation in which human beings will both be good, be fulfilled, and fulfill their purpose to be stewards of the earth and to be.
Well, it gave them guidance through the prophets also.
Well, the prophets would come, but this is before that. This is
the prophet.
Well, sure, yes, but that's not the point. Moshe is more than a prophet.
No,
Prophet is different than a prophet. Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is, you know, is different than that. He's not more than a prophet. He is a prophet, but he's the point being.
The leader too.
He is a leader too.
Prophets.
But this is well before the prophets, and the point being that God, in the story, in our narrative so far, has tried with the first people, with Adam Harishon, and with Chava. He's tried with Noah. He's tried with he's tried with all the peoples he's worked with so far, that God has worked with so far, and still working. So God has this plan, and God is working on this. So this is supposed to be a new kind of tool. I say all of this to say that how do we understand what we're supposed to do? What are we supposed to be as a nation?
A light onto the nations.
Yes, sure, but are we supposed to be? Now I'm talking like we're nation as an and nation as a medina. So nation as a people, yes, as an but also as a medina, as a state. Are we supposed to be? Where does sovereignty and statehood play in this?
At this point?
No.
I mean,
thinking when you think about if you wanted to live, if you wanted today, you say, Rabbi, I'm done. I want to move to Israel. It's too much. That would be a lot too, but you're going to move to Israel, and you say, I want to move to Israel, and I want to do it because I feel moved to live as if I were among a kingdom, a nation of priests, as a part of a holy nation.
mm-hmm.
Describe to me what that looks like. Does that mean statehood? Does it mean sovereignty? Which thankfully, I believe thankfully we have both of at the moment, and very rarely have had over the last couple thousand years. Does it mean one and not the other? As somebody just tried to, a professor or someone I spoke to last week tried to say to me, that perhaps we could have sovereignty without statehood, without statehood or something. Does it mean we are, I don't know, withdrawn, and we say we don't want to be of the things that are of this world, and politics is dirty and messy, and power is dirty and messy, and a kingdom of priests and a holy nation wouldn't engage with such dirty profane things such as power and sovereignty and whatnot. You could say that to me. I would disagree with you for the record, but you could say that to like that's an interpretation of this, isn't it? It could be. I think we'd have to be foolish to not say that it could be. Um, I could think of some, if you want to go the other way, I could think of some other ways you could interpret this as well. Okay, and the third thing we're pulling in is Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, Alav Shalom, who was obviously the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom for 20 years, and although an Orthodox rabbi, someone whose teachings I turn to quite often. He wrote in one of his books, Covenant, because when we're talking Torah, covenant, and the moral imagination of a Jewish state, covenant is a bond of loyalty and responsibility. It joins us to one another in a shared project, larger than any of us, that none of us can achieve alone.
So it implies a community of covenant.
It does imply a community of covenant, doesn't it? But and covenant is something we all do together, right? That's the image of it. It's like a lattice. It's like one of those, I don't know, one of those finger trap things. It's like, as long as it's holding, it holds, right? As long as it's pulling, it's really super strong. And to be pulling, everyone has to be working on it. If people are not doing it, then it just kind of drops into nothingness. Very true. Any other thoughts on Rabbi Sachs? I'm curious, looking at all of these texts now, I'm trying to, let me see, can I make this? Okay, well, you got all the English in here. I can't get the Hebrew, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. Uh, uh, so we got all the English in here. So what does it mean for a people to be bound to a land, not only by history, but by mission? So many nations are defined by the land and their history, right? The English, probably, you would say, right? The Russians, maybe. The Japanese. These are people for whom they've been there. They've just been there. They've always been there. That's just, they've been there. And then there are people bound together by mission. Who does that sound like?
Us.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, America. I was gonna say America is a nation bound by mission, right? Because it's not based on, I mean, quite literally, not based on how long you've been here or any of those things, but rather by buying in essentially to what we call citizenship, which some could call a form of covenant.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our credo.
Yes, for sure. For sure. America is a creedal or covenantal nation in that way, and also in a different way, but in a very similar way, the Jewish people. But what I would say is, what we have here is, what does it mean to be both? To be bound to a land and a mission. How many nations are both?
Israel.
Right.
That's about it.
It's not a long list. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's the only one. I might not be thinking of some, but we know for sure, the one thing I can say without any doubt is that it's not a long list of nations that are both tied to a land by its history and by a mission, which is reflected in the land. Yes, was somebody going to say something?
I think at one point the English felt that they had a feeling their mission was their.
Yeah, I guess mission isn't always good, right? I mean, it gets into what your mission is, right? Well, yeah, not everybody likes it. I guess you can ask India about how they felt about Britain's mission in the world. I don't think they liked it. We didn't either, but it's fine. In any event, um, an interesting question I have for you to continue to prod this forward. How does Torah's idea of covenant, as expressed, we're good, as expressed here, um, differ from modern nationalism? After all, could the covenantal relationship, I mean, is there a difference?
Yeah, because there's a covenantal relationship with God.
Well, sure, yes, absolutely.
Not nationalism necessarily.
Good. That's one way in which certainly certainly our the Torah's idea of covenant is one of relationship between person and God, but also it's a three-part relationship with Torah being part of it, Torah and the people of Israel and God. And the Torah and our ability to interpret the Torah prevents it from being a very. The funny thing is, our ability to interpret this is going to get a. This is a little. I know this is a little off of our topic, but our ability to interpret Torah gives us bounds that prevent us from actually saying that it can be anything we want. Judaism or our relationship with God can be anything we want it to be. Because that would be possible if it were truly just about us forming a relationship with God. But it's not just that. There is a narrative and rules and a peoplehood dimension that is over and above that. That is different. That distinguishes it. And
We
so,
also, I'm
yeah.
sorry,
No, go for it. I'm good.
we also have God saying to us, I give you this land, but I give you this land only as long as you obey my Torah. It's on condition.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I would say, and we don't have this text in front of us, it's not on condition, actually. What's on condition is the first occupation of the land, which we learn later is always supposed to be, is always supposed to end. That the exile was always supposed to happen. So it's not actually conditional. The promise that we should that promise is not contingent in the long run. It was contingent at a short period for the exact purpose of the end of the kingdom of Israel. Um, So it happens to not be conditional that we should be in the land. But I see what you're saying.
It's a holy land, and we have to deserve to live there, do we not?
We certainly do. That is most certainly true. Um, the reason I'm hedging, if I'm being completely transparent with you, is that too often that phrasing that you used, but you didn't mean it the way they mean it, of conditionality, is used in many contexts to invalidate our story and perspective.
I,
And so I want to give the second part of the context. Because if you only read that part, then yes, it would sound like that. And the people who want to say it in a negative way do only read that. And so you gave that part already, which is great and I appreciate. And now I have to give this other part, or else your part will be the only one that's there. And it'll sound like it's conditional, which it is not. So we can't have, so we're not going to do that. But um, in the sense of how the Torah's idea of covenant differs from modern nationalism, I think the Torah's idea of covenant, I said before, isn't inherently exclusionary. Um, the idea is that the people can join into it. In fact, that's why we're not one of the religion. There are some religions that don't accept converts. Judaism is not one of them. The reason for that is, though we don't proselytize, we don't go out seeking converts. If someone chooses to become Jewish, or they think that they want to be a part of this covenant, which asks a lot of you, like any good covenant, in addition to getting some pretty good benefits, you are also required to do things. But if someone comes and wants to do that, they can. It's not a problem. We do that. So whereas I would posit modern nationalism is often used, and when to an extent, I somewhat identify with the label of nationalist, only in the sense that I like my country and am proud to be from it. As an American, I like this country, and so in that very mild form, I would consider myself a nationalist. But obviously, like any term, there's gradations. And when it comes to nationalists, there are ultra nationalists for whom perhaps their version of covenant would be very different from ours, especially as it tends to be exclusionary. Um, so here's a question, Lauren, though, that I think you bring up in me, which is, what does holiness? We spoke about being a kingdom of priests, a nation of priests, a holy nation. What does holiness require of a sovereign Jewish state? The truth is, a lot of this answer is in parts of the Torah that if you remember back to, you can. There are literally rules, right?
Circumcision became a big issue.
Circumcision is required, although it's not required in that way. Like in Israel, it's not required. Sorry, required in a religious sense, not in a. Israel doesn't require young men to be circumcised when they're born. That would be a violation of all kinds of rules.
We
Yeah.
say in the V'ahavta, in order that you remember and do my commandments and be holy unto me. I would think that's what we're expected to do, to remember the commandments and to live by them.
Okay, so some of this, there's very much, Lauren, I appreciate the Haredi answer. Good to have. Right? My friends from Chabad were here, they would say, do mitzvot. They would say, do mitzvot. That's what it means to be a kingdom of priests. We should have, every Jew should be doing mitzvot, fulfilling commandments. Learning Torah, praying 3 times a day, all the good pious things. Yes.
Refraining from military service, at least.
I didn't say it, you did. But okay, what else? We've got the Haredi answer. It's check, stamped, it's done. What else might it require? Might it require, let's think about it let's get down to tachlis details, folks. I mean, it requires rules about how you do food. Mm-hmm. It requires rules about how people conduct themselves. It requires rules about, in Israel, we see, does the army get kosher food? It does. who gets buried in what cemetery based on ritual law or based on what? Like, what parts of society are governed by ritual law, religious law, and what parts of society are governed by democratic judicial systems? These are real questions that nobody had to deal with in all of human history after the period of the kingdoms, really, after the Roman Empire fell, until 1948, or until I shouldn't say that really, because the Yishuv, the people who lived, the Jews who lived, that were part of the Jewish agency and built up the institutions of the state of Israel, had been building them for decades before the state was established in 1948. But still, someone had to make all these arrangements. And it's worth thinking about that we should really understand the compromises that need to be made, had to be made, and will have to be made. To have something I want us to know going forward from this into the future classes, to understand modern Israel and Zionism, is that it's fun doing this as an academic exercise, but people are living and dying trying to actually figure this out. And so I want us to really be able to understand how difficult it is to wrestle with how one gets and keeps sovereignty, statehood, and power for the first time in millennia and uses it well.
Brings up a question I always have about no constitution in Israel.
Yeah.
And it sounds like these are thorny questions that make a constitution tough.
Israel, when in its founding, in its Declaration of Independence, pledged that it would form a constitution, but found, first of all, after that, it had to fight a war for 2 years. And then afterwards found it too difficult, quite frankly, to form a constitution. They still had some 15%, 10% of their population who were Arab Muslims who were under martial law for until 1967. They had borders that were still attacked every day because they weren't real borders. Every border Israel had was armistice lines. It was a very turbulent situation, and that shaky ground meant that Israel didn't wrestle with some of the things you'd need to wrestle with to have such a constitution. They have done their absolute best, and I would say the situation is not it's not an easy one. But yes, they were supposed to have a constitution. They have instead a series of what are called basic laws, which are constitutionally understood by the courts as having special significance, but in practical terms just require the legislature to pass them like any other law. It's not like here where if you want to amend the Constitution, you have to get 2/3 of the House and the Senate and then 2/3 of the states, and you gotta, blah, 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 or maybe it's not 2/3 of the House and Senate, but 2/3 of the states have to ratify it and all this to get it. It's not like that. It's just worth understanding. Holiness, I think, when the question was, what does holiness require of a sovereign Jewish state? And I would say holiness requires requires such a state to make difficult choices about what it means to be Jewish, which are tough questions, and what it means to be quite possibly a modern liberal democrat. We say liberal democracy. what it means to be a liberal democracy, which up until this point, Israel's had no trouble fitting into. Although recently, Israel has been forced by circumstances, by their own mismanagement, and by the world to answer a question, which has been how do you maintain, which is something we're going to talk a lot about in the next, especially a little bit next week and a lot in 2 weeks. How do you maintain the Jewish character of the state and its democratic nature? It's how can it be a Jewish state, a liberal democracy, and a a state for all of its citizens within the borders it controls, which include Judea and Samaria, some call the West Bank, and Gaza, which we can argue over how much, but Israel wishes to have security control over these places in the long term. Even in the Oslo Accords, if a state had been arranged along those lines, even in that, the plan was for Israel to maintain security control. In other words, Israel would have provided the military of the Palestinian state because they wouldn't have been allowed to have it was always going to be Israel militarily. The question is, if there's not going to be a Palestinian state, what does it mean to have half the population be not Jewish and to rule it as a Jewish state for Jews? What would that mean if that were to come to pass? It's not there at this moment. We're still living in this weird quasi-existing post-Oslo world in which the Palestinian Authority exists and rules over the vast majority of the people who live in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. And there are a lot of Israeli settlers living in the West Bank, and there's Israeli military operating in Area C, which is mostly unoccupied of the West Bank. So we're still in this messy reality where nobody really has full control of anything. But if one day Israel wants to take full control, what would it mean? And how do we do that in a holy way? By the way, it doesn't make me a crazy radical right-winger to say, I don't know what the future. My third lesson in this is called Hopeful Zionism. I'm going to present to you, and we're going to talk about some texts that offer understandings of what it could mean for there to be a peaceful settlement to this, the different proposals for a peaceful settlement to the Israeli-Arab conflict. Some of them involve, compromises I wouldn't make, but it's not up to me in the end anyway. In the end, what's important for us to remember in our love for Israel and our Zionism and in everything, to remember also that Israelis and Palestinians will in the end have to live with whatever is or is not agreed upon between these sides, and they're the ones who are going to have to agree to it. Nothing will ever be, anyone who tells you that the world will impose on Israel a solution to this, they're lying to you. Probably for money, I don't know, but I'm just guessing. But they're definitely lying to you. And anyone who says that the Palestinians are going somewhere, and if only Israel occupies more of the West Bank, then they'll move to Gibraltar, I don't know. That's not going to happen either. And so I'm not just presenting Hartman's lens, but also my own personally, quite frankly. There are two peoples, regardless of your feeling about the nature of when these peoples originated, there are two peoples living in this land. And they're going to have to find some way to live there. I'm even sympathetic to some of the remember, before Israel existed in the 30s and the 20s, the 1930s and 20s, I have to start saying that because we're in the 2020s now. We're going to start getting into it's the 20s and 30s, but okay, sorry. It's getting a little late. Okay. But the 20s and 30s. So there were some really crazy ideas about confederations, and there could be 5 states, there could be the 2 Jewish states from the old days, and there could be an Arab state, and then there was, of course, originally, I hate to point out that the the League of Nations mandate of Palestine eventually became both Jordan and everything we're fighting over west of the Jordan River. Um, at the time, many believed that that state east of the Jordan River was meant to be the state for the Arab population of the Mandate of Palestine. By that rule, all Palestinians should quite rightly be Jordanians and should move there. But again, as I said, they're not going to do that. This is one of those things where people say, "Oh, I have a perfect solution. Why doesn't everyone just do exactly what I want them to?" And that would be great, but no one's going to do that. So we have to live in the world as it exists. Being a holy nation doesn't mean being people who close our eyes and say I la 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 la. So we gotta.
As far as having multi-ethnic groups, the United States has a lot of that and is attempted to make a union which falls apart periodically.
Yeah. So at Hartman, teachers emphasize that Israel is not only a refuge, which, to be fair, there is that thought, right? There are people out there who come to me and they ask about moving to Israel as a way to be safe from anti-Semitism. Uh, but Israel is not only or primarily a refuge. It's an aspirational society at its best, one that must translate ancient values into modern institutions. What does it mean for Israel to be both safe and good? Can Israel do both?
Yes,
Cool. How?
maybe not perfectly, but it isn't that what we do here in the United States? You have to defend yourself. You have to be able to protect yourself, but at the same time, you have to treat everybody as having an inherent dignity, uh, and inherent rights. We try to do that. We're not perfect. Israel can do the same.
And in fact, this is how, through Israel's history, it has tried. Israel, you may have heard, depending on your circles, more mockingly or less mockingly, the term most moral army in the world. Israel has held itself out, and it has very strict rules of conduct and of engagement for its soldiers, for its for its how it bombs, how it does things that are military in nature. There is no way for to fight a war where no one, where only 25-year-old men carrying M16s are shot.
Right.
There is no way.
Right.
No, are shot, meaning no bombs, because no buildings can be destroyed either, remember, or else the war is a genocide. Remember, it's
No,
important. No, I'm obviously, this is the point. I'm being facetious. There is no war that has ever been fought, or certainly never won, the way Israel's critics would wish it to fight. That doesn't mean that Israel should not hold itself to the highest moral standards of armed conflict, as it tries to. Its rules of armed conflict are in line or exceeding the ethical standard of every Western, and by Western I mean NATO military, including that of the United States. Um, and wars are complicated. And for Israel to be both safe and good requires something the Israelis have, which is a trust in their military system. Um, and it requires every individual soldier and every individual commander to hold to because the piece of paper that the IDF hands out saying this is how you should do war only matters if the guy who is in Gaza about to enter a building and clear it wants to, does it. If he doesn't, then we're not living up to that. Now, I'm not saying he's not. I think he is, but it comes down to that.
Because good mean no civilian casualties.
Well, that's another interesting question that I would put to that I would the Torah would say that essentially there is no war without bad byproduct. You should seek to avoid war, the rabbis say.
Reading Joshua, they wiped out whole populations.
Well, okay, yes. We could talk about divine war, and that's an interesting conversation too. What does it mean when you are divinely commanded to go to war? I would say the thing that makes what I appreciate about Israel's wars, I guess if I have to use that word, is that they are defensive in nature, is that they don't begin because Israel starts them, except for the Suez Crisis. That one Israel started, but in '56. But but wouldn't have done it without the British and the French.
Right.
Yeah. But in any event, but Israel, they did it. They started. So it's but in any event, what I'm saying is that because these wars are more defensive in nature, these are not holy wars, is what I'm saying. None of these wars are divine wars that God doesn't. We don't believe God is sending us on any holy wars. These are not holy war. Israel doesn't view them that way, and that's important. Even Israel's religious leaders don't view them that way, and that's important. It's not a theocratic society. Contrary to, although the government, I'll tell you, is pretty pretty religious right, about as religious right as a government could ever be, and is certainly the furthest right in Israel's history. But a government elected once, and barely at that, does not invalidate a nation, obviously. So we don't, I have little patience for well, we hate Bibi so much. Guys, I'm not a huge fan myself, I hate to say. But it's not relevant to our discussion of Israel, the current government. Okay. Let me see. So contemporary application. How should a Jewish majority relate ethically to non-Jewish minorities? Does anybody? No, we don't need those texts for this part. And Sam, how does a Jewish majority relate ethically to non-Jewish minorities? I bring this up because Israel a couple of years ago passed a nation state law and sees itself very much as the nation state of the Jewish people. There are several minority groups, some of whom serve in the army, like Druze and Circassians, some of whom don't, like Arab Christians and Muslims, although some Arab Christians do serve in the IDF, and some Israeli Jews do not serve in the Israeli army. So this is all part of how a majority relates to its minorities. So, for instance, Israel is a country, because it's been besieged, it requires people to serve in the military, conscription. There are some Western nations that still do this, very few, I think. I think Germany just tried to bring back conscription and it got knocked out. It didn't make it. Right. Well, sure, yeah, but we're good with Germany now, I guess. It's not a problem. But in any event, so we have conscription. Do you conscript ethnic minorities? This is an interesting question. There are pros, there are yeses and nos on any side I could imagine of it. Maybe you say yes because you want to integrate them into your society. Maybe you say no because you don't want to force them to fight for the Jewish state. Maybe you say, because again, conscription is forced. There's no, oh, maybe you want to do it, maybe you don't. Again, formally, those who are not Jews in Israel are not required, are not conscripted to the military.
Hmm.
If you're an Arab, you don't have to go. You can volunteer, but you don't have to go. If you're a Jew, you're required. So the question becomes, except for the Haredim, obviously, which is actually is always their big argument. They say you need more men. There's 20% of the population is Arab. Go get those men. Go bring them in. Now, obviously, there are also other things people might say. They might say, if the people who are a large minority, maybe they don't want to fight. Maybe part of the majority isn't that interested in having them fight or be a part of the army. Maybe it works out for everybody. Maybe it doesn't work out for everybody. How do we balance these
They've
things?
never held a referendum on that, have they?
No, there are no referendums in Israel. I mean, it's not. No, no, they made the decision. All these things were made with, again, no constitution. They were made at the beginning, and they just stuck with it for for 75 years. But these decisions were made right away. In 1950, you just said, okay, anyone who's not a Jew, we don't have to have them serve in the military here. That's fine. There was already, the culture of it already existed, and there wasn't an interest in trying to uh, do anything in particular with a large minority population.
When you're a minority, can you serve in an all Israeli unit? I mean, that was the big question here.
Oh, yes, yes. You mean if you're an Arab Christian, can you serve in an Israeli Jewish unit? Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So that's just.
They don't have special units just for like Arab Christians or Druze or Circassians. These people are all throughout all the units. They all have to eat kosher food. Although if they're Muslim, and there are the occasional Muslim who serves in the IDF, and they can get halal food if they want. It's allowed. They don't have to just eat kosher. You know what I mean?
Do not non-Jews vote? And if they vote, they're part of the community.
Yes. All citizens of the state of Israel have a vote. Again, this is the part of Israel that's liberal democracy.
Yeah, right.
So everyone who's a citizen of the state of Israel votes in national. They don't have They don't have a different. They don't have like a House and a Senate and a president. They don't do it that way. But in elections, everyone who's a citizen of the state of Israel gets to vote. If you're an Arab Christian, an Arab Muslim, a Jew, whatever. As long as you're an Ethiopian, someone who came and got citizenship after being a migrant worker, whatever you are, you can vote. But that's the liberal democracy part, right?
Mhm.
But yes, everyone has a say in the thing. However,
I'll be drafted.
However, it should be noted, I just want to bring up as a notice on that, they can't all be drafted, first of all. And it should be noted, there are many Israelis who live in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, who vote in Israeli elections because they're Israeli citizens. Palestinians who live in Judea and Samaria and Gaza obviously do not vote in Israeli elections, as they are not Israeli citizens. They have a green, they have the Palestinian identification card. They are citizens of the Palestinian Authority. They vote in Palestinian Authority elections. There hasn't been one in almost 20 years,
Yeah.
but theoretically, should the Palestinian Authority ever hold an election again, they would get to vote in those. Obviously, voting in Israeli elections would give them a lot more power to choose over what happens over their lives.
Mhm.
At the same time, obviously, there is no appetite among Israeli Jews to open the vote to people who, quite frankly, polling says still support October 7th, years after it. These are these difficult questions. So, what do we do with that? For the moment, the answer has been nothing. More recently, there have been, at least on the Gaza front, America and Muslim nations are working together to try and put together a plan that will get Gaza on the road to autonomy so that Gaza can govern itself independent from Hamas and independent from Israel. If it could do so successfully, it could be the plan of Turkey and Qatar and America at this point is to, if Gaza can be that base, then it can produce the leader that can reunite the Palestinians, and can unify a Palestinian state, between the West Bank and Gaza. Will that happen? I don't know. It's never happened before, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Anything's possible, I guess. Okay. So what does my as a closing question, as a question to be the last big conversation piece, I want to ask, what does moral imagination, our theme for tonight, mean for a state that faces existential threats?
But we certainly abrogated moral imagination when we put all the Japanese in camps.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
That was Governor Warren and President Roosevelt who signed off on that one.
Yep.
Incidentally, they owned a lot of land in Southern California and never got it back.
Fair enough. Anyone else? What does moral imagination mean for a state that faces existential threats?
Well, could they treat the minorities as having certain inalienable rights, citizen rights?
Well, they do. They have equal rights.
Yeah, equal rights.
They already have equal rights.
So if they break the law, they are
Everyone faces equal justice under the law in the state of Israel. Just for the record, there's no separate law between Jews and non-Jews. Everyone faces the same law. An Arab-Israeli Supreme Court justice chaired the commission that put Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in jail. It's possible. It's not about it's a liberal democratic state. It's not about, my question isn't about, when I say what does moral imagination mean, you were right with the first thing when you said we gave it up when we interned the Japanese. What it means to have moral imagination for a state that faces existential threats is to be willing to make leaps even though those existential threats exist.
There was no need to take away the Japanese.
No, sure. But in this case, I'm talking about, Israelis did that with Oslo. They did that when Golda Meir reached out to Egypt. They did that. Israelis have done that. They've been the nation with moral imagination. In the last decade or so, honestly, we've seen a lot more shell mentality, fortress mentality.
Yeah.
A lot more us against the world. It's not like Golda Meir and Abba Eban, famous foreign minister of Israel for a long time, and David Ben-Gurion didn't know that the world hated Jews. Believe me, they lived through the Holocaust. They weren't there, but they lived through the time of the 40s. They know that the world hates Jews sometimes. It didn't shock any of them. They were still able to try and work with the world. And they were still willing to try and do something to seek peace, which is something that needs to be done internally in Israeli society, which you're going to learn a lot more next week about the divisions in Israeli society and how those play out, and how we should understand them. And then in our last class, 2 weeks after, in 3 weeks, we'll talk about hopeful Zionism. We'll talk about Zionists. We should all be Zionists because being Zionist just means that the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland, or in some part of our ancestral homeland. And being a hopeful Zionist in this case would be someone seeking to implement a model of peaceful settlement. And of course, what we should desire is a peaceful end to what has been over 100-year cycle of violence in the land of Israel. There has been too much violence. It has been because of many reasons, because of nationalism and extremism and many things. And if Israel wants to be, and it can be, a state that lives up to its highest ideals, the highest ideals that we were taught in the Torah, then it has to be a state that, even if its neighbors don't seem ready for peace, is always seeking it.
Is there a part of Israel that looks at the ethical behavior of Israel and tries to have it not do what we do with the Japanese? Have all
Israel has a very well developed social criticism sector, has a very well developed NGO presence, has all the branches. I mean, I think Amnesty shut down their branch there because they're like, I don't even want to get into what I think of all the NGOs, but my point is they all operate in Israel because it's a Western democratic nation. So they host all their own criticism. So the New Israel Fund is a totally Israeli operation that makes it its life's mission to totally dismantle everything Bibi has spent his life doing. So yeah, it's yeah, all the criticism of Israel lives inside Israel too. Anyone have any further thoughts for this evening before I let you go? I summed up a little bit, but I'm happy to take anyone else's summation.
I I'm not sure quite how this fits in, Rabbi, but I find myself trusting the IDF much more than I trust the settlers movement, and that troubles me a great deal. Uh, I think, as you say, the armed forces do try and behave ethically, and they do. Uh, I don't like, and maybe I'm not knowledgeable, but what I hear on the news about what's happening with the settlers in the West Bank.
While not all of it is accurate, enough of it is that it should concern you. You should trust the IDF more than hooligans who burn stuff, because hooligans who burn stuff are breaking the law, and the IDF is a professional military with a code of conduct and rules of engagement. That being said, the IDF should really be in charge of policing these people in the West Bank,
Yes.
and
Yes.
bringing to justice anyone who does crime. Part of the problem with the situation as it exists is that there's a lack of clarity for Israelis as to who handles justice in the West Bank, in the Judea and Samaria, because it's technically Palestinian territory. But these people, the Palestinians, honestly could get a lot more power and sovereignty, maybe even if they were willing to accept. Remember, the Palestinian demand is for a Judenrein state, a state without any Jews in it in the West Bank. If they were willing to say these people should be our citizens and under our police,
Governance.
right, under our governance, that would be a very different situation.
Yeah.
They might think twice if they had to deal with Palestinian policemen instead of no policemen, essentially. Because the IDF is technically responsible for those areas, but only for some of them, as the Oslo Accords set out. This is what's also complicated about it. The IDF is also restricted from operating in certain areas, but so is the Palestinian police. And that leaves no one policing these areas where Palestinians will build things and settlers will build things, and then they will fight each other in an area where no one was supposed to have built anything. I'm not saying it's not a shanda. It is. But it's also complicated. And there's not a good solution until we come to a agreement about what is to be with Judea and Samaria. Is it occupied Palestinian territory? Is it not? Is it Palestine? What is it? We all have to come to an agreement. And by we all, I mean the Israelis and the Palestinians, not us so much. But we should understand it.
Now, there's some moderate Palestinians that could talk, are there not?
I mean, there are some moderate Palestinians in the West
Yeah.
that could talk.
In the West Bank.
No, not there. The West, like the West. You live in the West.
Like here.
Yeah, you live in the West. That's where the moderate Palestinians that you're thinking of live. But we will deal with that as we deal with the tribes of Israel next week, which includes the Palestinians, quite frankly, who are this group of people who live in the land of Israel. And if you don't understand their perspective, you're gonna probably have a pretty poor understanding of why we're still fighting in that part of the world. Okay, I thank you all for joining me tonight, and I hope we'll build our crew next week, and I hope it's a little warmer so that maybe people will join in person, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
Thank you
Rabbi.
very much for doing this, Rabbi.
All right,
That
good
was
night.
really interesting. Thank you.